Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. McLaren are under fire yet again with the flexi-wing drama continuing through the Japanese Grand Prix weekends. More information now has emerged from Suzuka, new camera angles that seem to show a major level of flexibility in McLaren's car compared to what the Red Bull is currently experiencing. Jos Verstappen therefore hits the timeline to suggest that in a few rounds time, Red Bull's competitiveness compared to the McLaren and potentially McLaren compared to the rest of the grid may be substantially different. This championship is not necessarily going to be a two-horse race just as of yet. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today. Starting here, this is potentially the Cape Town Grand Prix. Now, there are so many cities and countries currently looking to have a Formula 1 race. This is an option. We think that Kyalami could be an option. We've raced there before, but let's be real, that circuit probably is not designed for these modern massive Formula 1 cars. That's an option. This is another one here at Cape Town. And look, it is effectively a street track, isn't it? I will admit, it's not the worst that I've ever seen. It could be worse. It probably could be better. Maybe they could clean up this section in the bottom right-hand side. Probably a few too many turns for my liking. But it's not absolutely horrific. It's, you know, it is what it is. It is also by the sea. I'm sure that it looks very pretty and very aesthetic. And if I had to choose whether I would just kill Miami and have this, I would probably do it, to be honest. But I don't know if that's what we're going to get, right? Because Miami may stay. It is what it is. It's Formula 1 in 2025, baby. Another feature of F1, though, this year is tyres that are not fit for purpose, really. They don't degrade in the race, but yet they degrade so much, or they overheat over a qualifying lap to such an extent that you can't even do a full lap without your tyres dying in the third sector. It's not great. Pirelli got to figure it out, and I know that they're under pressure from Formula 1 and the teams, and I'm sure what they do is challenging, but they don't do a very good job as far as many are concerned. Now, they will be bringing to Imola and to Miami the softest available compounds. It was a big talking point in Japan. The tyres simply did not degrade at all, and it created what was a very dull experience. Even Pirelli admitted this and basically said, yeah, that race was hella boring. We are going to change the compounds. So Japan, they had the hardest selection of compounds, and it's the same again in Bahrain. Now, Bahrain is a slightly different circuit in the fact that it's more rear limited than Japan is for sure. The surface is what they'd have experienced during practice. So, look, it's probably not going to be a 2-3 stop banger in Bahrain, but nonetheless, they are going to, for a couple of the upcoming Grand Prix, step softer in terms of the compounds. And we have confirmation here that for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, they will be using the softest available compounds, the first appearance of the C5 tyre. So, assuming it doesn't rain and therefore we actually get to see these tyres, that will be relevant to the running of the Grand Prix. So, probably a step in the right direction. Honestly, I would be in favour, generally speaking, of always moving towards the softer compounds. It does mean if you go softer that the teams tend to just preserve the tyres more. They can't, bash out on the tyres too much, but equally there's tyre preservation whatever you do nowadays. So if there's a chance that it creates more stops or more degradations, you get more tyre offset and therefore overtaking becomes more possible, I think it's probably a good thing for the sport. Red Bull continue to be in such an interesting position. Even Isaac Hadjar was asked the question, if Red Bull say, we want to bring you in, what are you going to say, right? So, I mean, it's tough for Yuki, it's tough for Isaac, it's tough for Lawson as well. I don't think Isaac is going to be in that car, but he's done a stellar job so far this year. And it is honestly all-out warfare over there at Racing Bulls this year, because I think Yuki will get the rest of the season. Unless he is horrifically bad, then I guess they'll put Hadjar in the car. What else are they going to do if it doesn't go to plan? But my expectation is that Yuki will get the season at Red Bull. That's what they've said, but do we take their word for it? Maybe not. Hadjar and Lawson, therefore, are doing battle. We've got Arvid Lindblad coming through the junior ranks. He's incredibly promising. Red Bull think he's the next star. They're going to put him in a Formula 1 car, I have basically no doubt at all. That means that it is this season really a straight shootout as far as I'm concerned between Hadjar and Lawson for keeping that drive. Right now, Hadjar seems to be in the driving seat. Will that continue? We'll see. There's also Ayumu Iwasa, who's also a Red Bull junior. he's in the conversation too, maybe at some point, and he is going to be driving in FE1 at Bahrain. So many rookies are doing FE1 sessions. I think this year they have to do 2 rookie sessions rather than just 1 in FE1, so it means that we are going to see more of this, and Bahrain is a sensible circuit to do it on because all the drivers got loads of testing mileage around here not that long ago. So there's going to be 6 drivers stepping out. Iwasa is, I think, going to be in Verstappen's Red Bull, which is definitely relevant. Ferrari, they've got Dino Beganovic in Charles Leclerc's car, and well, let's just talk a Ferrari real quick because again, there are some interesting stories emerging. Apparently the car has chronic understeer, and Leclerc has developed a style of braking which improves the rotation of the corner by slightly delaying the release on the brake. Hamilton's been using this too, and therefore they've been able to try and start maximising the car, but it's not great, is it really? And they're continuing to refine the method. Now, of course, that strategy may change if the car is fixed or if the car improves to some great degree. The Ferrari, as we said yesterday, was running 3mm higher than they had wanted to. That was costing them 20 points of downforce. That was costing them 3 to 4 tenths a lap. This is a minor thing, but, you know, this is the difference between being competitive and being nowhere near the pace. And if this proves to be a fundamental flaw in the car concept, then good luck to Ferrari for the rest of the year. You might as well just look to 2026. But they do have an upgrade this weekend to the floor that they are intending to at least hope that it will help them with these issues. So they've got a new floor on the way. As I said yesterday, they're somewhat divided on whether they're actually going to use it or not. The general theory seems to be they will use it. I mean, we said yesterday that they'll probably use it on Hamilton's car in first practice, maybe not on Beganovic's or Leclerc's, to get some degree of comparison there. But it will be a big upgrade, right? On paper, this is a brand new floor. It's the first upgrade they're bringing of the season. It's meant to upgrade everything from the Venturi tunnels all the way back to the diffuser. A macro upgrade aimed purely at performance and stability of the peak load. So that's what Sky Sports Italia have to say about it. I did just want to quickly share this. This is an article here that Gary Anderson came up with today on the race, just discussing anti-dive and anti-lift. So effectively, the angle of the suspension arms here determines that when you slam on the brakes, as he describes, you slam on the brake in a Formula 1 cars, there's about 300 kilograms of weight transfer from the rear axle to the front axle. And if you had no anti-dive or anti-lift into the suspension, the car dives into the ground or lifts away from the ground at the rear end. So this has been something that Adrian Newey developed into the Red Bull suspension from the very first year of these regulations. And other teams eventually caught up to such a degree now that McLaren have the most severe anti-dive on the grid based on what we can visually see anyway. So he's highlighted some of the wishbones in play. If you rank the teams on the quantity of their anti-dive, you'll get McLaren, Red Bull, Racing Bulls, then Williams, then Aston, then Mercedes. Of course, they've got a different, they've got the push rod setup, as you guys can see here, rather than the pull rod of the Red Bull, Racing Bulls, McLaren. And Ferrari have switched to the pull rod this year as well. You can see lots of push rod setups here, but the worst team, but the team that has the least amount of anti-dive is actually the Ferrari, which maybe is correlated to a difficulty in keeping a stable mechanical base, and, maybe on some level means that if the car is shifting a lot forwards under braking, then if you run the car too low, it's going to scrape along the grounds, and maybe that's one of the reasons causing them problems. At the end of the day, Ferrari aren't stupid, right? So they've obviously done this for some reason. Like, they made the decision to switch to the pull rods, and they made a conscious decision to not go with the level. I mean, you can see the delta there, or like the angle between those two wishbones, comparing the green lines here on the Ferrari compared to what we see on the McLaren, and it's, completely night and day. There was obviously a reason for that. And, well, maybe they didn't want to feel like they were taking too much risk, but there is, let's just say, a correlation between the level of anti-dive and how competitive these cars presently seem to be. To such a degree, of course, that Hamilton's looking at his old team Mercedes. I don't think there are any regrets from either party, Ferrari, Hamilton, whatever. At the end of the day, Hamilton has driven 3 Grand Prix with this car. It's early days. He's won a sprint. He's secured a pole position for the sprint race. He certainly had that moment. And I don't think Hamilton will ever regret driving for Ferrari, nor I think will Ferrari regret signing him. But if Mercedes were to go on to win a championship, and to be honest, the constructors this year, maybe even the drivers, but, the constructors this year is not out of the question for Mercedes. Maybe the drivers is possible too. It's pretty unlikely, but, if McLaren get affected heavily by this new technical directive that's coming in, we'll discuss in a second. If Mercedes are not so much, although based on some of the images we're about to see, they probably will be, to be fair. Mercedes can be in the mix, and next year, if the engine is as good as they say it's going to be, who knows what's going to happen. So it's interesting, but it's just funny how it works out that Hamilton leaves, and now is finally the year that Mercedes use all that information that they've gathered over the last few years with Hamilton in the team and Russell too, to finally design the car that's actually relatively stable. Now, let's talk about this delta that may arrive, because McLaren currently have the fastest car, Red Bull clearly do not as it stands. The feeling is that for Red Bull, the next 3 Grand Prix are all about damage limitation. It's Bahrain, it's Jeddah, and then it's Miami. After that, we go to Imola, and the Imola Grand Prix is where Red Bull are set to unveil their major upgrade package of the year. Now, will the upgrade work? That is a major question, because let's just say the correlation between the simulator and real life at Red Bull has not been especially good, and we're going to see more evidence of that in a second. So Red Bull will need to improve their car, sure, but McLaren may be a couple of rounds after Imola in Spain pegged back quite significantly, because there is a front wing and the rear wing, I think as well, technical directive coming into place to change the level of flexibility that is allowed on these aerodynamic components. The Red Bull car does not flex as much as the McLaren car does. There is a feeling that if this technical directive comes in, it may affect McLaren more than Red Bull. But there's also the argument that Red Bull spent quite a lot of time over the winter developing new flexible technologies that are now getting outlawed, which means that they don't necessarily have the ability to continually develop elsewhere for the rest of the year. So the pros and cons may go either way. But there is, from Red Bull, certainly hope that McLaren will get pegged back by this, and over the next 5 to 6 rounds, which will still be pretty early in the season, right? We're only 3 Grand Prix in, we have 21 still to go. So, there's a feeling from Red Bull, certainly, that McLaren should get pegged back over the next few rounds, which could well be enough if Red Bull can figure out what's going on themselves and Max Verstappen is still driving like Max Verstappen. Now, AMUS did a very interesting article about this, and Marco said the following: whenever the simulator promises us great lap times, things go backwards on the racetrack. This was the case 2 years ago in Monte Carlo, and again this time. I told Max he should rely on his experience rather than what the simulator says. Horner says the best sensor in the car is the driver. We able to get the car into the window, but Verstappen demands more from Red Bull. He wants a car that no longer requires him to worry about whether the penny will drop in time. To be capable of winning in Suzuka, Red Bull had to set up its cars differently in virtually every parameter than the simulation data suggested. One might therefore question the correlation between the tools and reality, but the truth is maybe different. The configuration that the Red Bull works in, because look, the McLaren was the fastest car on the Sunday, but it's not like Max had a tractor this weekend. Max, relatively speaking, had a tractor in China, and even with all of Max's brilliance, it's not like he was able to win the Grand Prix in it, right? It's due to various other things as well, but, sometimes if the car isn't there, it's not there. Whereas the Red Bull this weekend, as good as Max is, it was still a car capable of doing what it did. Because if it wasn't, then even Max wouldn't have been able to execute. Now, to say that Red Bull got it nailed is pretty much true. I think they probably were in like the top 1% of their potential performance window, and Max extracted the top 1% of that to get them the pole in the qualifying session, and then it was good enough to win the Grand Prix from there as well. But there is a feeling that, the Red Bull is capable of getting into that window, but it's very difficult to achieve it, and they're trying to go step by step to make it happen. The second driver falls behind in this process. He lacks the experience with the car and the class of the lead driver to quickly find his own solution. Either follow Verstappen's path or insist on his own car setup. Both options cost lap time. So that's another thing. The Red Bull is so tricky that maybe Max can figure out, he can figure it out by the final session when they go into quali, how he wants to develop it, so do Red Bull. But the second driver, especially a new driver, really struggles with that. And Washe admits that it's a similar thing for Red Bull to what they had last year. The car's balance is constantly changing. It takes too long to fix it. Luckily, we have Max in the car to implement it. But he says in general that these ground effect cars have led many teams to a dead end. The teams have the same problem: drive low and as stiffly as possible, make sure sure the car's balance isn't lost and you stay legal with the plank wear. The other generations of cars were more frugal on this front. And, you know, there's a feeling, I think Paul Monaghan even said that, you know what, it's not just the Red Bull that is difficult to drive, but many of the cars this year, including seemingly the McLaren, can be somewhat tricky to drive as well, just as a consequence of hitting the limits of what these regulations are capable of. So Red Bull know that it's in there somewhere, but to do that every weekend for enough Grand Prix for Max to win the championship is probably not going to happen unless there is a change in the relative performance of the cars. McLaren get worse and Red Bull potentially get better. Now, is it going to be something to do with this? This is the rear wing of the Mercedes. And just by way of comparison, we can see here that what seems to be leaving Spoon Curve going through 130R, there is a substantial difference in where the rear wing lies. Now this, of course, if you can do this as a team, you want to try, because if the rear wing is higher, as you guys can see here on the left-hand side, then it will generate more downforce and more drag, which you want in the corners. But at high speed, you would like to shed that drag if possible, which is what we see on the right hand side, where comparing these images side by side, as you can tell from the blue line here at the bottom, the wing has managed to depress itself by probably more than is allowed by the regulations, but, you know, the loads at these high speeds are very substantial indeed, and the FIA can't test it properly, and they try and find ways to resolve it. But at the end of the day, you know, that's a substantial amount where that rear wing has gone down and effectively shedded some downforce in a straight line. And you can see this in great detail with the McLaren as well. Now, you know, with the McLaren, you can also see it to a great degree. You can also see how much it wobbles as well. Look, this guy, Rob Marshall, I'll find a picture of him now, actually. If you haven't seen this guy's face before, he is undoubtedly one of the most important engineers in Formula 1 right now. He used to work for Red Bull. He now, for the last couple of years, has worked for McLaren. And even Red Bull themselves have said this, that Rob Marshall, when he was at Red Bull, he would constantly be coming into the office with ideas on flexibility of wings and how to utilize that for advantage. Many of these ideas he came up with were considered even by Red Bull to be, you know, a little bit illegal, a little bit grey area, a little bit over the line. And there's a general feeling from Red Bull that Marshall's taken many of these ideas to McLaren, and I'm sure that McLaren will use the legal ones, right? But look, Marshall is the key figure in this flexi-wing debate over the last couple of seasons, and he did it at Red Bull, and now he's doing it again seemingly at McLaren. And you can tell by this side-by-side, I don't think I'll get copyrighted for this because it's sped up, but I'll just play it through regardless. Just compare for a couple of seconds what's happening at the top of the screen and what's happening at the bottom of the screen. It is clearly a very different story. I mean, the rear wing of the Red Bull depresses to some degree, you can tell. I mean, you know, through 130R into the braking zone, you guys can see, if you look at the Red Bull one real quick, you can see that there is a change here in the situation. But if you look at the change in the McLaren, it does seem, you know, notably more evident, let's say. And even, you know, through the corner, it's wobbling around quite a lot anyway as Norris here goes over the chicane. So this is part of the elements that the FIA are looking to dial out with their technical directive for Spain. And, you know, Citrus puts this out here today, sped up version of the McLaren's breathing rear wing. And guess who decided to come back to the timeline for this? Mr. Jos Verstappen himself. So this is Jos Verstappen's official Twitter account. So you see what he was followed by and all this. And he doesn't do many tweets. I mean, you know, he retweets things occasionally. He occasionally does like a reply to someone, I think. So yeah, if we have a look at his replies, I mean, okay, he replied to someone on the 8th of March and I mean, August 2024 before that. He doesn't do much of it, does he? So today he actually reposted this tweet here from Citrus saying, yeah, the season definitely starts in Spain. McLaren is a monster when it comes to wing flex. And Jos Verstappen, Max's father, hits the retweet. So, you know, there clearly is a belief at Red Bull that when that change happens, McLaren will be slowed down to some degree, and it will help Red Bull relatively. So until then, it's about damage limitation, but it's not like Max is far behind. He's 1 point behind in the championship, which is not bad at all. This weekend, I think in many respects, McLaren simply have to win. They were dominant in testing at Bahrain. Let's not forget that, was it Thursday night or whatever the day was, where Norris did that long run race simulation and he was just so much faster than anybody else. Should be hotter there in Bahrain. It should help McLaren with the fact that their tyre degradation seems to be better than others. It's a race that really McLaren have to win, and for Max, if he can get third, I think that's a real success. But I think watch out for Mercedes this weekend, because they were particularly competent around Bahrain as well in their testing. But very much enjoyed your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. We'll discuss everything more in due course. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.